All right, Kevin, back with you for another episode of the $1,000,000 Relationships Podcast. And today I am here with Marc Mawhinney. Marc, did I just pronounce that right? Is it Mawhinney? Is that
That's pretty good for a first run through. Yeah, it's close enough. Mawhinney, technically, I always say it's like Ma, then Winnie the Pooh, Mawhinney. But
gotcha?
I've heard
Okay.
everything. I've heard Mahoney, Mahoney, McWhinney. I'm like, there's no C in there. Where did you get the C? I don't care. That's cool. I'm not picky.
Well, I'll tell you, this is so interesting because, I have known of you for years and we've traveled in a lot of the same circles. And recently, I don't remember what it was. I saw you post something on Facebook and I'm like, dang, I said, I should reach out to Marc and ask him if he'd be open to doing an interview for the podcast. And here we are. And I am just really excited to have this conversation with you today and around this topic of relationships. So for starters, thanks so much for taking the time to do this, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for the invite. And fun fact, in your neck of the woods, you're in the Pacific Northwest, right?
Yes.
And I don't know if it's your state, Washington State, or not, but I didn't realize Chuck Mawhinney, who is the most decorated sniper in U.S. history. He has the most kills. He was in Vietnam. He's like the Babe Ruth, Michael Jordan, Wayne Gretzky in the sniper world. And I believe he's still alive. He's in his 80s. He's a Mawhinney, and I always thought that was really cool. So, gee, I'd love to meet that guy.
Wow.
Weird bit of trivia. So,
a friend of mine was a sniper, and he's out of the military now, but he was a sniper and stuff. And man, I'll tell you, he's got some stories, man.
Yeah, me, I don't think I could hit the broadside of a barn. I'll play a video game with my son, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not. I thought I was better when I was growing up playing video games. Now I'm just middle-aged guy. I suck. Yeah,
that kind of sounds like me too.
No Call of Duty or anything for me. I'm not that great.
No. So, well, what I'd like to do is just start off by turning it over to you, Marc, and so that you can set a little bit of context, because I have just, well, and it's like I've known of you for a long time, but after reaching out to you and asking you to do an interview and having you accept that, and then I started stalking you and I started looking, and I know I shared with you, before we hit the record button, I was like, how impressed I was with this offer that you have on your website. And the reality is, you've been doing what you do for a long time, and you have some deep roots in doing what you do, and you're making a really big impact in this world. And so I want to start by just setting a little bit of context, letting you share in your own words about, what you do, who you serve, what inspires you most about what you do. We'll just kind of like give the listeners an idea of who Marc is and what Marc's all about.
Yeah, so I mean, it's always difficult to cram it into a 30-second soundbite, right?
Well, you don't have to. You got time. You got
45 seconds. Yeah. I've been in the coaching world since 2014, so I'm coming up on 10 years in next March. And my whole thing is helping coaches grow their businesses, get more clients without relying on paid ads. And I like to think that I cut through fluff filler, not the same boilerplate, BS you've seen in the online coaching space. There's just so much garbage out there, and I try to keep it real and meat and potatoes. And I find that works best. So my background's actually in real estate. Previous to that, I spent about a decade throughout my 20s. In real estate, build up a very large real estate company here in Canada. Then everything collapsed, and that's actually how I found out about coaching. I didn't know much about coaching before that. Okay. I was helped back to my feet by several coaches and mentors, and that's what led eventually into me getting into coaching in 2014. I thought, you know what, this is I've seen what it can do, how it can help, and I think I'd like to do this. And here we are.
Very cool. And so, since getting into helping coaches, how many coaches would you say that you have helped over the last 10 years?
So it depends on the definition of help. Okay. I've done this exercise before. I say in some bios and intros, say for YouTube videos, things like that, thousands of coaches. Now that's factoring in clients, online course programs, lower price products that I sell, my online communities. I mean, I don't know if you're in the coaching jungle group, there's 25,000 in there, and I've
Okay.
had the privilege of helping a lot of people in there as well. So I say thousands because it's easier than being like McDonald's, and not suggesting that they've served billions or trillions of burgers. I haven't helped billions of people, but it's easier than changing the number on the golden arches, so to speak, every time you sell an
That's
extra
right.
100,000 hamburgers. So I think they just gave up, and now they just whatever, say billions or
Yeah,
served.
I've seen signs that says billions and billions.
Yeah,
That's
but it's much easier that way. So, but if you look at it, I haven't been doing this for 2 or 3 years. It's been a decade, right? And working very hard. And, you get your name out there after that first year where it's always a little difficult to get the name message out there. And then you get repeat business, referrals, and all that fun stuff, which helps as well. So,
you bet.
yeah, time flies. It feels like 5 years. I mean, maybe that's from the pandemic's added, some time in there. It doesn't feel like 10, certainly, but yeah.
I can totally relate, because I've been doing what I do for a while, and I'm like, man, it doesn't seem like it's been that long,
No.
So,
And where I can really tell it's been a long time is, on Facebook, you can see your memories every day. If you go to facebook.com/on this day, it'll show you, whatever you posted this day last year, this day 2 years ago, this day 3 years ago. And it's interesting because I can notice my beard getting progressively grayer. It started off, 2014, 2015. It was like a coat of many colors. It was brown, red, bit of blonde, maybe a few grays, but it's gone progressively gray now. And that's how I can really tell, if you're looking at yourself every day, you don't notice that stuff.
That's right.
Yeah. It's I just embrace it. No just for men for me. It's
Yep.
We'll go natural.
I'm with you. Same thing. I look at pictures, 9, 10 years ago, I look way different, all darker hair, all that, So,
Yeah, but the joys of father time, I guess you can't stop it. So
that's right. That's right.
just got to go with it.
Embrace it. It's okay. I just, I turned 58 years old last month, and I feel at 58 years old, I'm just now starting to really figure stuff out, So,
I just turned 45 in June, and I'm the same way. I always like to say, middle age, halfway through. Well, the average age that men live to isn't 90. I'm being optimistic, and I think time's an interesting concept because it's a powerful motivator. The older you get, obviously money is important. You're motivated by money, but really time is what there's only so much of it left. And when you're in your 20s, you think you're going to live forever, right? Even your 30s, you start to get in the 40s, 50s, 60s. You start to get a little bit closer to the edge of the cliff. So
yeah, and you start to place a lot more value on time, for sure. So yeah,
I hate wasting time, and I may be a little too stringent with my boundaries. Early on, I would, I want, of course, coaches want to help people. That's why they're usually doing it. But I would be very open. Anyone who entered my world, you want to help them, whether they pay or not, or whatever. They want to pick your brain. And I realized pretty quickly that you have to set up some defenses there, or you get eaten alive. So I'm all for helping. There's different ways to help people. Someone reaches out to me, and I appreciate them being honest. Like, Mark, I don't have the budget for it now, but is there anything you can do? I'll send them over. There's free resources. Just like you with your show. There's probably podcasts I've done that would help them, or there's PDFs or something like that. But I'm not going to hop on for hours and hours and not be compensated for helping people directly. And I know that might sound a little, some people, oh God, he sounds like Gordon Gekko or J.R. Ewing or something, but you're in business, and you have to be compensated, or you're not going to be in business.
That's right. 100%. Yep. Well, okay, so now that we've got a little bit of context set, I'm gonna shift gears. I'm gonna reiterate the question for the benefit of the listeners. So, have you ever been introduced to a person or persons that completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And
I did.
Marc, I'm just really excited to hear your story, your experience around this topic of relationships.
Well, this might be awkward. I don't know if you've heard this one, Kevin, but I actually cut my person's umbilical cord. It's, that's my son. Anyone who doesn't get that joke, I did cut his cord. It was a very interesting experience, like a purple alien coming out, and yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
I've
I know
had
that.
that experience myself with my son. So
Yes, it is. It's kudos to the women out there for what they do. We had a part of it. I guess we were in the equation, but giving birth, you and I lucked out not having to deal with that.
you are
But
not.
I had my son when, yeah, my son was interesting because I always said I want to be a father by the time I was 30, and he was born. He was born 3 days before I turned 30.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And I actually hydroplaned on the highway a few days before that and rode off my car. And like that luckily walked away with a bruised ankle. Could have been even worse. I thought, geez, I'm lucky that could have been much worse with hydroplaning. But the reason I say my son is he was born at the tail end of the business closure in real estate I was telling you about, because my real estate brokerage closed in 2009. He was born in the summer of 2008. So he was about a year, maybe 13, 14 months before everything came falling down. And anyone who isn't a parent may not understand this, but as an entrepreneur, your children are your most powerful motivator, right? If it's just you, yeah, you and your spouse, obviously you want to be able to put food on the table, roof over your heads. But when you have kids and then you have that responsibility, you don't have the luxury of, if you go through a business closure, laying in bed all day, curtains closed, drinking Jack Daniels and crying to some country song or whatever. So I credit my son for motivating me through a very bleak time, really, for a couple of years after it was a messy closure. But I didn't give up because I thought, you know what, I really have to get back on my feet for him. And anytime I got beat around, attacked by, strangers or anyone out there, the media was kicking me around, I would just remember my son and think, I'm not going to hold back because of you. Don't have the luxury of doing that. And yeah, I credit him a lot. He probably doesn't realize that we talk a little bit about that stuff now, where he just turned 15.
Yep.
But I think as he gets older, we'll talk more about it, and hopefully he can understand how important he was to that comeback.
Wow. Wow. So you and I have stuff in common, because my son Brock was born on April 21st of 2008. And
Yeah, just a few months before my little, not so little guy now, but little guy then.
that's right. That's right. And it's very interesting. I don't usually do this, but I just feel led to do this because 2008 was a very interesting time for me. And I had this coach in my life at that time that I was investing in his help. And it was this would have probably, Brock was born in April. So this would have probably been around February that my coach and I were talking. And his name's Matt. And I had made a comment to him that I said, because when Brock is born in a couple months, life is going to change, And he's like, yeah, he's like, you're right, it is going to change. He's like, because Kev, babies bring money. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah. He's like, most people think that babies cost money, but they don't. Babies bring money. And he was a new dad. His son was born May 5th of the previous year and stuff. So he was a new dad himself. And I ended up I don't know, that comment that he made, it just stuck with me. And it wasn't like a conscious thing that I'm like, but it just stuck with me. And my business at that time was kind of, I had a company in the publishing industry at that time, and it was growing, it was up and coming. And, but Brock being born was, he was my first biological child. And that was such an experience. I will never forget. And you're right, with the comment you made about our wives. Man, that was a really long experience for Lisa and Brock that day. And, but I'll tell you, just being there for that and watching my son be born was such an emotional experience for me. And that whole conversation with Matt just stuck with me through that year. And I would just like, it wasn't a conscious thing. It wasn't like I was what do they call that when you tell yourself things like affirmations? It
Mm,
wasn't like that, but yeah, I was just like, yeah, he's right. He's right. And it wasn't like I was like affirming all the time, saying babies bring money. It wasn't like that, but it was like I just agreed with him with every core of my being. And I'm like, it felt so good being a dad. And my business grew like crazy that year. And that was the first year
mm,
in '08 that we broke $1 million in gross revenue and stuff. And that had been the goal for a while. And that was serious. I mean, well, we were less than 500,000 the year before. That was a lot of growth that year.
mm.
And it was on the back of that whole thing and that whole experience with Matt and him making that comment to me that just stuck with me and stuff. And now, of course, I'm sure like you, I look at Brock and go like, where did the time go? Where did
Yeah.
15 years go? You know?
The other thing besides babies, depending how you handle it, if you flip your thinking, I'd argue that breakups can be profitable as well. So I went through a breakup, 2.5 year relationship last year ended. And I, not suggesting this is the healthiest way, but just worked my tail off to keep my mind off her and that whole thing. And was very productive because I didn't want to, get caught up in emotions and things like that. I'm like, no, I'm just going to pour all that energy that was being put into the relationship, pour it into my business.
Yep.
Although some people with breakups would go the other way, they would get off the rails and it would hurt their productivity. But I guess it's all how you take those highly emotional things, baby births, breakups, all the other stuff, and what you do with it. And
Yeah.
as entrepreneurs, not saying you can't take days off for big life events. Like my father passed away in early March, and I wasn't exactly in the mood right then to be out doing my normal stuff. But you don't have the luxury of taking a couple months MIA. You got to make sure that your business is still being taken care of.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up such an important point. It's, because we're all going to have these experiences. I mean, I've had breakups in the past.
Mm.
My first wife, we were married for 4 years and ended up getting divorced. And at first, the story that I told myself around that was that, well, man, you must have been a really shitty husband, because my mom and dad, they were married till they both passed away.
Yeah.
And so I just thought I was going to do the same thing. Once I'm married, I'm married. That's just it. I'm just married, for the rest of my life. And so, the story that I began to tell myself was, well, man, what a failure you must have been. You must have really done something bad, because look, this didn't work out, and we get to choose the story we get to tell ourselves about any dang thing, any experience that we have. And it's very important that we tell ourselves stories that serve us, not stories that don't serve us, And my buddy Sean Stevenson, before he passed away, one of the things he used to say is, everything happens for me and through me. And the first time I met him was 10 years ago. And I remember him saying that. And I'm like, man, I want to make that my own. I want to be able to say that for me and believe it with the conviction that Sean has. And it's not always easy, because we have to look at things and ask ourselves, this breakup, well, how is this an example of this is happening for me and through me? And we have to search for those answers and come up. But I'll tell you what, man, it's in our best interest to do that, man.
So silver linings, you could say that you could find a silver lining for pretty much anything.
Yeah.
I mean, some people might say, well, if you're diagnosed with a life, an illness where basically you're guaranteed to die in a year, then that's obviously not good. But I mean, the flip side of it is I guarantee that year you're probably going to value things differently and pour your time into different things than you would have otherwise, right? But that's an extreme example. But I think that you could look at silver linings for pretty much any event that's out there that happens to you. And you have to, because if you're going the other way, looking at the negative stuff, there's so many things that can happen to you. You're not going to get through this life without any curveballs. The business closure in 09 felt like the end of the world for me, because I spent a decade. That was all I ever did right out of university. I was in real estate. I was a real estate guy, and I held that very close to my identity. Looking back now, I wouldn't be here chatting with you today. And if I hadn't been coaching for the last 10 years, not to knock real estate, but after 10 years, I was getting a little sick of it, and not always the most fun business or whatever. I'm having a lot more fun coaching. And that wouldn't have happened if I'd been stuck in real estate.
Totally. Yeah. Well, so if you look at this relationship with you and your son, and so it's been 15 years since he was born, and a lot has happened in your life since that time. And if you look at the relationship you and your son have, I'm sure you come up with a lot of examples for this question. I'm just going to challenge you to come up with just one. But if you look at the relationship that you and your son have had, as a result of that, what is an example of that is where you got to make a really big impact in this world, and hands down, that would have never happened if not for this relationship that you and your son have together?
Well, starting the business, really, I could trace it back to that, starting the coaching business. I don't know about you. I know a lot of people, you probably are too. A lot of people in my world are unemployable. They just can't work a desk job or for someone else. And not to knock someone that's doing it. If they're in corporate and they like it, all the power to them. Yeah. For me, I spent so many years working for myself that wasn't going to be the path I wanted to get into after real estate. And dollars and cents wise too, it didn't make sense. I couldn't make as much money working, ABC widgets from 9 to 5 versus having my own business. And part of that goes back to what we chatted about earlier in this interview, was wanting to provide a certain lifestyle for my son, which is very important. So it's interesting now he's getting to that age where he started his first summer job this year. I was trying to convince him to start working with me because he's into like video editing and all the other stuff. He wanted to do something different this summer, but I'm still keeping at him I would love to have him working with me, and because he's into online stuff and everything as well. So yeah, that's the next challenge, is to get him on board here.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, so I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation. What really stands out for me, Marc, is, well, for one, I'm really glad that I reached out to you, but you are just this really laid back, just down to earth guy and stuff. And I know, for anybody that's just listening to this going, man, Kev, I really like Marc. I like the way he shows up. I like what he stands for and stuff. And who knows, maybe they're a coach. How can anybody listen to this that would like to learn more about you and what you're doing, how can they find out more, Marc?
Yeah, I mean, the main site's naturalborncoaches.com, okay. not naturalbornkillers.com, naturalborncoaches.com. The Facebook group that I referenced earlier, you can get there at thecoachingjungle.com. I also have a secret coach club. Anyone watching this will see the poster in the background, and that's at secretcoachclub.com. Okay,
perfect. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation, Marc. Anything you feel led to share as we wrap up today?
The one takeaway for everyone, regardless of age, station in life, is go out and make a bunch of babies. Like, throw away your condoms.
There you go.
If you're at that point, you're ready.
Both of us.
There you go. Have more babies. Plus, you'll be doing everyone a favor, because in the United States and Canada, families are smaller than they were in the past, so it's going to affect the economy. So do your bit.
There we go. So everybody do your part. Everybody do your part. Yeah. All right. Well, Marc, thanks again. Really appreciate you coming on and taking your time to have this conversation. I'm really excited to share it with folks. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.